are more or less similar to their parents, so that those that survive and reproduce pass on the genes with similar characteristics. So the name of the game to win the game of evolution is survival and reproduction, passing on the genes. It is not a game that's played consciously where you plot out strategies. It's something that just happens. Okay, now, first slide shows the peacock, and we are going to return to this slide, but we want to go to Evolution Explains Biodiversity. So evolution, what is the biodiversity that we want to explain? A little bit of history of the natural world, how it came about. The Earth came about in the solar system about 5 billion years ago, and life appeared somewhere around 3.5 or more billion years ago as simple bacteria. It stayed this way for a very long time until about 900 million years ago, when we get it is called the Ediacaran fauna, which are organisms that did not have bones or skeletons. So we only have their impressions from when they crawled on the seafloor and left prints that became fossils. These existed from about 900 million to 580 million years ago. About 580 million years ago, life underwent a very large change. It did not happen exactly all at once. We're talking over tens of millions of years, but geologically it was a very short time. Skeletons appeared and we got actual fossils. At this point, life diversified into all the major phyla, all the major groups of animals today appearing still in the sea. This is the Cambrian period, and this period is called the Cambrian explosion. And at this time, we got some of the earliest life found in Canada in the Burgess Shale, which is the record of fossils in the Canadian Rockies. It includes Anomalocaris, which is this big predator just a little to the left of the center of the screen, which was a monstrous predator that ate the other animals. The burrowing Pikaia, which is the first one of our line, the chordates, which led to the vertebrates. It did have a protonotochord, which is our, yes?
Mr. Darwin, would you give a scale on this drawing?
Yes, we're looking at Anomalocaris might be, we're looking at something that's about 1 foot or 18 inches in length, this stuff.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have there our first, the burrowing one over there on the right side is the precursor to our line that was already in the Burgess Shale, and maybe the oldest vertebrate ancestor, which is our phylum, the chordates, although not everyone agrees. Then we've got the very spiky little guy here, called Hallucigenia, and then the cup-like Morella over on the left side, and these are giving you an idea of how different life looked back then at the beginning, the first higher life. Most of these invertebrates, Anomalocaris being an arthropod. Now, before I go on, I want to remind you of the classification system of today. Remember, you learned this in high school biology. However, it's a little bit different than the way you learned it. The biggest grouping of life is no longer the kingdom, it is the domain. So there are 3 domains of life. Within the domain, the next level is the kingdom. Kingdoms include, for example, animals is a kingdom. Plants are a kingdom. Fungi are a kingdom. The next level down is the phylum. So phylum within the animal kingdom that we are is the chordates. That means you have, at some time in your life, you have gill slits. In our case, humans, it's only as embryos. Fish are chordates, they have gills when they're adults. It means you have something called a notochord at some point in your life. In our case, this is replaced with our vertebrae. It also means you have a dorsal that is on the back of you, hollow nerve tube or spinal cord. So that's the chordates. The other phylum of major interest shown here are the arthropods, which include crabs and insects, and Anomalocerates. Below the phylum is the class. Our class is the mammals. Another class within the chordates is the reptiles. And next level is the order, then the family, then the genus, then the species. Okay, that we want to bear in mind. You can have subphyla, superorders, and subspecies, and so on. In fact, we, the chordates, have a subphylum where the vertebrates. Okay, now that we have that in mind, and we've gotten up to 580,000 years, all major animal phyla starting at once, so we understand what that means. It's a mystery. Why did all the animal phyla start 580 million years ago, and then there's never another animal phylum that evolves? Next slide. Okay. Can I see the next slide? Because this is the coral reef. And yeah, so we'll go back 1 second to the coral reef. Can you back it up? So the coral reef gives you an example of the very, very high biodiversity that evolved. The coral reef and the rainforest are the ecosystems with the highest biodiversity in the world. There are more species in the rainforest and the coral reef ecosystems than anywhere else in the world. Half of the species are in the rainforest. Okay, now, how is this classified? This shows the next slide. What is what? I told you there are 3 kingdoms of species, or 3 domains. 3 domains that are the biggest groupings of animals and plants. The first domain, you see the root at the bottom where all life came from. This domain is the eukarya. That is us. That's the eukaryotes. The eukaryotes are all animals or plants or other things that have a nucleus setting aside their DNA in a compartment. And they have other organs set aside with membranes. So they have a mitochondria for cellular respiration. They have a chloroplast in the case of plants to carry out photosynthesis. Their DNA is packed within chromosomes in a nucleus. What I want you to realize here is you see that these are all different kingdoms within the eukaryotes, and right here is our one kingdom, the animals. The other kingdoms are slime molds, or plants, or ciliated protozoan like the paramecium, protozoa like the amoeba, the fungi, those kind of things. Next slide.
Mr. Darwin, on the plant branch, you have green algae twice, 2 different branches. Okay,
let me see. Oh yes, okay. That is the green algae. The reason that very good observation, that's just, you can kind of ignore that. That's just two different versions of when the green algae branched off. Okay, next. Well, we're getting to bacteria next. So these are all the kingdoms of bacteria. Every one of them is a different kingdom of the bacteria. Bacteria are prokaryotes. They have no compartmentalized, membraned organelles in the cell. So they have no mitochondria, no chloroplast, no nucleus for the DNA. The genetic material is scattered throughout the cell. Fundamentally different, and their DNA is much less complex the way it's run than us, the eukaryotes. Bacteria is one branch of the prokaryotes, one domain. I told you there are 3 domains. The other domain is on the next slide, and it's called the archaea. And they are also, these are all their kingdoms within the domain archaea. They are also prokaryotes, one cell and DNA scattered throughout the cell. Now, here's the point I want you to see. Of all the species, 95+% are archaea and bacteria, are prokaryotes, unicellular simple things. We, in terms of number of species, are really somewhere around 1%. That's conservative to say these are 95%. About 99% of all species. They live deep under the ground, they live up on the surface, they live all over, and they live in us. And we will discuss this a little later. Now, going back 2 slides to our slide, where we have the 1% of the eukarya, we see that only one phylum in the eukarya of that 1% of all species is animals. So within that, a good 90% are one-celled simple things. But if we were to take the animals and break them down, we would find most of them are not in our phylum. They are arthropods, most of them being insects. And if we were to break down the insects, they're mostly beetles. One group of insects, and within that, that's one order of insects, and then within that, one family of the beetles predominates, and that's the weevils. So imagine a real serious biologist would be studying bacteria, a real serious zoologist would be studying insects. Okay, let's advance. Now we have an idea of the diversity that we're trying to explain. This is how we started out 240 million years ago on the Earth. All the continents were together. Next slide. And because the continents drift along, it's called plate tectonics, they move about 160 million years ago. It looked like this. The Earth did. Next one. 90 million years ago, we're starting to get a little closer to today when South America breaks off from Africa. India is over